For people who aren't familiar with CD Howe Institute, what do you do?
We are a think tank. We look at public policy problems, especially where there's kind of an economic angle, where you've got some insight that tells you how the economy might respond, how people might respond differently, if they were taxed differently, if we had different trade policies and so on. We're not committed to any particular point of view, and we often publish papers that disagree with each other. So there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance sometimes among our audience.
Bill, Canadians are facing a lot of uncertainty right now. There are rising costs. There are a lot on the minds of everyday Canadians. So can you unpack what's going on today and what are most Canadians struggling with at this moment?
The thing that's very acute for us right now is the state of the economy and the threat of trade wars with the United States. So if you're in an area that's affected, if you're an automotive worker, for example, you've got a very immediate concern. What is making this a lot harder to deal with is that we're at the end of about a decade now when Canadian living standards really didn't rise. And so people do feel that pinch. They experience rising prices, but their wages are not rising to keep up with it. And so that longer term decline in our living standards has really made it harder for us to deal with the shorter term impact of the US trade war. So we've got long term and short term concerns. I'm actually optimistic about Canada long term because we've come through things like this in the past, but 10 years of living standards going nowhere, that's something that hasn't happened in a long time. So we do need to make a change.
Absolutely. A lot needs to be done. So let's talk about that roadmap to recovery and what can be done. And specifically, I know that CD Howe Institute has laid out a plan in two different reports, an economic strategy for Canada's next government and also your latest shadow budget. So what will people find in both of those?
What we are focusing on is the federal government because a lot of the problems that we've had over the last decade really do seem to be connected with things that it has done or hasn't done over that decade. So one of the things, when you just look at the big fiscal picture, the federal government spends a lot more than it used to. And most of what it is spending on is transfer payments, and people enjoy receiving transfer payments, but you always have to ask, is this the best use of the taxpayers' money, or is this the best use of the money that we're borrowing? Another big increase in spending at the federal level has been on their own personnel. And our passports are getting processed all right. It's not a disaster. Tax, a lot of people would have strong views about that. They're kind of pulling it off, but has the service improved in proportion to the increase in cost? There's no way that it has. And so again, we've just seen the federal government bloating in a way that has put the squeeze on the rest of the economy. In some ways, it's obvious, the taxes that we're paying, that's quite visible to people. In other ways, it's a bit more subtle. For example, when the federal government hires a whole lot of people, those people aren't available to work in places that might do more good, such as in business or in the not-for-profit sector or even other levels of government that provide a bit more goods and services. And then when they borrow money, that's absorbing saving that we could have used for other things. We could have used it for housing. We could have used it for investment. So those two things are a bit more subtle. It's not something that really, hits you between the eyes. But after 10 years of it, we're feeling the effects.
In my conversations with Canadians, one thing I know is true is that Canadians feel like they are overtaxed and also under-supported. What can be done?
Well, one of the things that you want to see the federal government do, and I'll start with them, is to spend less and spend smarter. So when you think about what you want a national government to do, it has to defend the country. There are certain things only a national government can do. There's a degree of economic management that goes with that. And then some of the taxes that are very important, like corporate income taxes, you want the national government to be doing that. It wouldn't make sense for cities to levy corporate income taxes. It's not so sensible even for provinces to do it, although we do. So in the areas where it ought to focus, we want to see the federal government focus more. And when the federal government is wandering away from its mandate and getting into areas of provincial jurisdiction, people think healthcare is important, and so they tend to think that the national government should be into it. But the feds don't deliver healthcare services. They're not very good at it. And so it's partly a matter of refocusing. And I'll just go back to what I said a moment ago. The federal government is costing double what it used to. It's borrowed an enormous amount over the last few years, and remarkably little of it was directly to do with COVID. And it's taxing us a lot more than it used to, and it's gotten a lot bigger in terms of headcount. We haven't seen anything like the improvement that we should, and so that's been squeezing the rest of the economy.
It is also fair to say that over the past 10 years, we have faced crisis after crisis. You said at the beginning of this conversation that you are feeling optimistic. So what can we do to regain control?
Well, I would like to see the federal government get its budget under control. We are going to be paying much higher taxes as a result of all the extra interest payments that they're going to be incurring as a result of the increase in debt. And Canadians are very heavily taxed. We pay heavy personal income taxes. As a sidebar to some of the concern we have with the United States right now, I'm very frustrated that as we think about the talent that we could be welcoming home to Canada, because a lot of Canadians live in the United States, as I think about the talent that might want to relocate to Canada from the United States, one of the first things they're going to encounter is top marginal tax rates of over 50% in most provinces that hit you from quite a modest income level when you compare us to other countries. So we're very heavily taxed. And our businesses are taxed, and as a result, they're investing less than they could otherwise. And so that's the first thing that we focus on in our shadow budget and also in this economic strategy is just getting that burden down. Because if you're not attracting people, if you're not retaining talented people, then it's pretty tough to see where your base for getting going is.
And how do we stop this overspending?
It's a very tough thing to rein it in when there isn't serious political direction from the top. And the last time we saw this was during the years of Jean Chrétien as prime minister, Paul Martin as finance minister. And after sort of fooling around the margins, if that is not too dismissive a way of putting it, they realized they had a problem on their hands, and they buckled down and they did one thing that I think is absolutely essential. They said, we're going to balance the budget. None of this percent of GDP, none of this debt ratio. A lot of people think that a balanced budget is kind of a simplistic way of coming at it. I say it's the one that works. There's nothing like that bottom line. I mean, in your business at the C.D. Howe Institute, you do not want to be in the red. And I think it's the same thing for a government. You want the target to be solid so that when somebody says, I got a great idea to spend an extra dollar here, the conversation is immediately, okay, where are you going to spend less? Or would you actually raise taxes by $1? None of this, oh yeah, we'll borrow and let it take care of itself.
So taking into consideration everything that we've talked about so far and thinking about the urgency of the situation, what can you leave me with in terms of how quickly we have to act? And again, long-term, looking out what's at risk if we don't?
Well, what's at risk if we don't? Let me just start with that, and I'll come around and finish with it as well, because it has to do with the politics of it. We've had a decade of very low investment, very low productivity growth, stagnation in wages, and people are very unhappy about it, and people are feeling vulnerable in the face of the U.S. threat. So that's what's at stake. What do we need? We need that sense of urgency. I've mentioned a lot of things on the fiscal side. I think it would be a good idea for us to actually cut corporate income taxes. I'd like to see us cut personal income taxes, including at the top end. I would like to see that hard bottom line target. And then we can move on some other things as well that we that are priorities, like getting the internal market gummed up by all these restrictions and so on. And the thing that I think is helpful about the current trade crisis with the United States is it has focused people's minds. It has made people willing to contemplate doing some things that otherwise they wouldn't have been ready to do. And if I'm the federal government, I want to seize that opportunity, because if the temperature goes down, if we start to get a bit more of this populist, oh, let's have these sugary snacks over here and this little handout over there, then the moment passes. And then what are you looking at? You're looking at 5, 10 more years of the same thing. Politically, that doesn't work either. So that would be my message to the federal government. You've seen what 10 years of this sort of thing does. Let's not have 10 more. Let's do something different.
So now is the time to act.
Now is the time to act.
Absolutely. Well, listen, for people who want to read either of these reports, where's the best place for them to go?
cdhowe.org, our website. We're a not-for-profit or charity. We give everything away. So it's all there. And if you don't agree with it, let us know, because we're trying to figure these things out just like so many people are.
Excellent, Bill. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.